Because they don't live
Morning, I'm
around.
going to
I don't think any of them live
call
around.
the Mobile Source Committee meeting to order. 9 o'clock on September
Sort of
15th,
9.
2007.
That's you.
Call the order the Mobile Source Committee meeting. First of all, I'd like to, did I see, because I can't really see the picture, is that Dr. Lou that is present?
I'm here. I wasn't
Okay,
expecting
because
to
the
be
sheet
here,
that
but
I
I
have
am.
I wonder if
indicated
they mail those in.
that you were not going to be present today, so I
Yeah,
thought I heard your voice.
My conflicting meeting got canceled.
Okay, so then maybe what we should do is that, is make sure that we have, I know Supervisor Ashley is present.
Here?
Dr. Lou is present.
Yes.
Mayor McCullough? He is not present.
He's here. I'm here.
Oh, he is there. Oh, okay. Mrs. Mitchell is not there, is that correct?
Correct.
And Supervisor Kuehl is present. All right, let's get started. I understand that I'm going to do something so that everybody who may be sitting, may be listening, thinking that we're going to have an item that staff is recommending that item 2 be continued until our next Mobile Source Committee meeting of October. And because one of the respondents were not properly, did not in time receive the agenda notice in order to be present to make a presentation to us. So unless there's some objection from any of the members of the committee, I'm going to move I'm going to move that item to be continued until October. Any objection?
Second.
None heard, then that item is continued until October 2nd. So let's get started with item 1. Catherine, are you ready?
I'm ready. Hey, good morning. This item provides an update of the AB 2766 Subvention Fund program activities that occurred during fiscal year 15-16. The purpose of the report primarily is to provide an update not only to the governing board, but also to the California Air Resources Board regarding the use of the fees and the program results relative to the emissions reductions that occurred, as well as the cost effectiveness of the dollars spent. It also serves as a very useful information tool for local governments, as well as other interested parties. Most of you are familiar with the background of the legislation, but as a refresher, it was signed into law over 25 years ago, requiring that a portion of Department of Motor Vehicle registration fees be directed to local governments for the sole purpose of reducing emissions from mobile sources. It specifically requires that 40% of $4 of a surcharge go back to local governments through the district in order to support, specifically support our push towards the California clean air goals for mobile sources. The program operates on a continuous cycle, but if you can point out a trigger point, it's when monies are collected, which is on an ongoing basis. Those funds are subvened to the AQMD on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis. They then are distributed to local governments quarterly. Local governments use the funds to year-round to implement projects, and they report on those projects at the end of the year. We're coming up on now the first week in February at the time that they will report on the subsequent fiscal year activities. That information is reviewed by staff. It is then summarized in a staff report, which is going forward to you today. After the full governing board reviews and accepts the report, it goes on to the California Air Resources Board. Also, part of the cycle includes audits that occur on a biennial basis. Those audits are overseen by our finance department. So for this fiscal year, the program activities are such that there are 162 participating local governments that receive the funds. These are cities and counties that at the onset of the legislation adopted an ordinance that specifically said that they were going to agree with the requirements of statute. There were subsequent local governments that have taken on the ordinance requirements as they've been incorporated. So in total, we have 162 local governments. They received for this fiscal year 22.1 million. They spent just a little under what they received, 19.2 million, implementing 395 projects. And in total for the year, they reduced 6,100, almost 6,200 tons of reductions combined, NOx, CO, VOC, and carbon monoxide. The financial summary tells us that, and this is broken down by county, that local governments began this fiscal year with a beginning balance of $45.8 million. They received an additional $22.1 million. They are not required by statute to spend down the funds every year so they can roll those monies over. Many of them use the funds for additional projects that they have planned out in the future. So for this fiscal reporting cycle, they spent $19.1 million, resulting in an ending balance of about $50 million. Of that $50 million, they have pre-designated, whether through formal council action or just at the staff level, they've pre-designated $34 million for future projects that either short-term or long-term projects. And the remaining funds undesignated are $14.9 million. This pie chart shows the expenditures by category, reflecting that the alternative fuels and electric vehicles category claimed the majority of projects at 31% of the expenditures, followed closely by traffic management and then transportation demand management. We're continuing to push in the alternative fuels and electric vehicles category. Again, the purchasing of not only alternative fuel vehicles, but zero or near zero emission vehicles, especially as we are having cities to align their projects with the 2016 AQMP goals. For traffic management and transportation demand management, those are pretty constant projects that tend to claim quite a bit of the expenditures. And from there, you have a drop down in the percent of projects spent in transportation, public transportation projects, PM reduction strategies, and so on. I'll go a little bit more into depth with these different categories in the subsequent slides. This slide and the next one shows in descending order the emissions reduced per category. There are 10 project categories that projects consistently fall into. At the top is traffic management, which claimed by far the lion's share of reductions. This is not new. This is a continuing trend. One of the projects in this category is the City of LA's ATSAC, or Traffic Control Center, that continues to really come in, bringing in a good number a good amount of emissions reductions. So again, this claimed the lion's share of reductions, followed by the transportation demand management category, dropping down significantly. Also note in the far right column that the emissions reduction, the cost effectiveness has a pretty broad range with each of these project categories. As a whole, though, they all fall in total within CARB's threshold, which is $10 per pound or $20 per ton. These exceedances, though, in terms of the individual categories, are acceptable by CARB as the funds are used as a source to fund programs that ordinarily cities would not have the funds to do. So continuing on with public transportation, PM reduction strategies, we've got alternative fuels and electric vehicles. We're hoping that our efforts in working with staff over the past fiscal year, which is fiscal year 16-17, will result in a significant increase in reductions in this category. We also have miscellaneous projects, and these would encompass projects where local governments leverage their funds and partner with councils of governments for various projects, bicycle projects, including bicycle lanes, vehicle emissions abatement, land use, and then public education. Some of these project categories have a 10% cap, as we don't want to have the cities using funds for projects that they already have monies set aside for. And as staff continues to move forward with their efforts in working with local governments to ensure that they're being spent according with what's required in statute, we are promoting and encouraging various projects. For example, on the right, we are focused on ensuring that local governments use their monies to purchase alternative fuel vehicles and the supporting infrastructure that complements those vehicles. We are also making cities aware of technology as it emerges, and the ride-on electric lawnmowers is not a brand new technology, but cities have been a little apprehensive about using their funds for that purpose. So we are encouraging that use. This picture on the left was taken at one of AQMD's demonstration events, and that is one of the elected officials from Temple City testing out one of our ride-on mowers. And as you know, cities can, through the demonstration project, they can utilize or take advantage of sort of practicing with these vehicles for a period of several months before they decide to actually purchase them. But this is an eligible expense with these funds. Also in the category of transportation demand management, this supports both employer-based programs as well as other programs that focus on reducing trips and also eliminating trips. That picture on the right is particularly fond for me. It is van pool number 5 at the district, which if you can see there, we can't zoom in, but that's me in my van that I typically ride in 3 to 4 days a week. We also have PM10 reduction strategies that are eligible projects. These are projects that remove or eliminate the buildup of dust and particles on the road. So on the right, of course, is a CNG street sweeper. We've got pavers there that are supported by the funds. In the bicycle facilities category, this allows the purchase of various bicycle-related strategies, putting in bike lockers, putting in various facilities that just protect bikes and keep them safe. Pictured on the left, we have AQMD staff who are proudly wearing some AQMD jerseys that were designed by them for our Bike to Work Day. We have a number of staff who ride to work on a daily basis, and so this is just an example of funding that cities can use to continue to promote bicycling. In the traffic management category, funds can be spent on projects that reduce idling and that continue to make sure that traffic flows efficiently. So projects like signal synchronization, roundabouts, dedicated turn lanes, these are all eligible project expenditures. And in going forward with working with local governments, obviously they can spend projects just that focus on their cities, but we encourage them to collaborate with their adjacent cities to leverage their funds. There are lots of projects such as signal synchronization, bike lanes, putting in clean fuel infrastructure that they can partner together and have those funds go a lot further. One of the conversations that we'll be having with city and county staff very shortly is informing them of the MSRC program, which was just recently launched, their partnership program, where a minimum of $50,000 has been set aside for each city, those that receive under $50,000 per year, for them to be able to have the funds to implement viable projects. So we will be working closely with the MSRC.
That support the AQMP.
That support the AQMP.
Right.
Exactly. And in doing so, we continue to impress upon cities that there are some key things that will allow them to be successful. That is having the leadership from their councils and their boards in terms of decision-making and supporting staff. One of the hurdles here is just making sure that the leadership is informed of these monies and that they're available to be used for projects that not only will be beneficial to the city, but also again, support our region in terms of meeting our attainment goals for mobile sources. Also in the way of planning, for them to be forward-thinking in how they use the funds, and partnering, again, not only with the adjacent cities, but also with the AQMD to make sure that we're all putting our efforts together to move forward. So to do that, our program outreach consists of updating policymakers on the funds and making them aware every year about what their cities have done. Briefings, we conduct trainings every year. Last year we conducted 12 training sessions where we had approximately just under 100 local government staff to come through and get information on project eligibility, on changes in the program in terms of preferred projects that we would like them to spend their money on, and again, encouraging fund leveraging. We do have some work in progress. We are currently revising our existing program guidelines to clarify project eligibility requirements, and again, timing right now to make sure that cities are moving in the direction of funding projects that align with our AQMP goals. In order to do that, we have to collaborate with CARB. Our resource guide that outlines program guidelines is a direct reflection or comes from CARB's criteria and guidelines document. That document, unfortunately, is dated, and so we have to kind of press CARB, if you will, to move forward in supporting the changes that we are recommending. We also are working with them to improve the reporting tool that cities give us their information in on an annual basis. And with that, that concludes the presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. What staff is asking is that you approve the annual report to go to the full board at your October 6th meeting.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Each year that you have made this presentation to us, I've had the same question, so I'm going to ask it again this year. As I read this very voluminous report, one of the things that is very shocking to me, and always has been, and I know that since we have Supervisor Curl is on our committee now, each year Los Angeles County receives, lots of money and spends very little. And does that mean that they don't have any ideas itself of projects to spend money on? And there are other ones in this regard as well. I recognize that the city probably has more cars and than they do in the unincorporated portion of the county. But I get, when I see this kind of money and we're actually looking for large sums of money to fund some of our projects to help us with our AQMP, and I know we can't tell them what to do. We've gone through that.
You want your money.
Directly. But we certainly should be able to have some degree of influence so that the money gets spent and not necessarily
$34,000, that's not exactly enough to write home about.
No.
I think Supervisor Ashley, and maybe I think.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Western Riverside, $34,000. So.
But anyway, that's what maybe I'd like to hear from the people who actually have to administer this amount, Supervisor Kuehl and Supervisor Ashley, and I know that Mrs. Mitchell is not here, as to exactly what influence can we have on helping them to do projects that we believe then that would be able to help us meet our EQMP goals.
You're spending ours pretty well.
Dr. Parker? Dr. Parker?
Yes.
That's one of the things in this MSRC program we put together is incentivizing Los Angeles will be able to receive $3 million in matching funds through this program if they come forward with projects to support the AQMP. So we're trying to incentivize cities like Los Angeles to spend the money because we'll match it.
Okay.
The answer
Great,
from Los
fantastic.
Angeles. Well, we have
Here's the
a chief sustainability officer.
We'll
that
spend it about as fast as we get it.
Supervisor, actually, maybe you can mute your microphone for us?
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
thank you. Go right ahead.
My turn, Clark?
Yes.
We put into place a chief sustainability officer last year and asked for an overall sustainability plan for the county. It is not usual in LA County to spend down to the penny for two reasons. One is you can't just think up projects and have them happen all in the same year. And the second is one never knows. So we always require that some be, held back.
Okay. How about, I heard Supervisor Ashley said that you guys were spending most of your money?
Yeah, well, we're retaining a prudent balance, but we're spending it about as fast as it comes in. And then you take the pre-designated funds, projects that take a while to do, you add that together, and our balance is about what it ought to be. So I think we're doing okay. And all our jurisdictions are reported, so I think we're good.
Well, what Mayor McCullen stated that they were going to incentivizing other cities. Catherine, how well are we on making this information available to the various different people who have to make those decisions, that they can get additional matching dollars in order to help accelerate some of these programs or increase them?
Our staff has had a meeting with MSRC staff here and have given them our contact list in order to send out the program announcement. But on top of that, we will be contacting local governments. We have sort of some direct contacts that they typically don't work with. So we will be sending out a notification, and to the extent that staff resources allow, we will be contacting these cities individually to reach out and to provide some guidance. Many times we have the difficult battle of dealing with high turnover with city staff. And so the contacts that we've established in prior years, we kind of have to start the learning curve all over each year. But again, to the extent that staff resources allow, we will be reaching out to those cities directly, sending notification via mail or electronically, but then also contacting them directly.
Okay. Dr. Liu, any comments?
Yes, with the cities in particular, I noticed that City of Long Beach had a particularly high fund balance of 3.5 million with 1.7 of that pre-designated, so 1.8 million they haven't decided how they're going to spend. And if you can match that with MSRC money, then we start talking about things you can actually do something with. So I would, I know people on the city council in Long Beach. I'm kind of wondering what's going on there. But that's one I think you should really make a priority, because there seems to be a real opportunity. And obviously, given the impacts of the port and other operations down in that area, especially the West Long Beach area, there should be a lot of things that can be done to help them out. The one slide, I think it was slide 8, where you showed how incredibly cost-effective the City of LA transportation automatic traffic surveillance project, the one that's getting all those emission reductions. The staff agree that those are legitimate emission reductions, I mean, that's what they're actually getting, and this is measured in pounds of pollutant, right? I mean, do we know how much of that is NOx versus might be CO or something?
That would likely require a
Different type of
separate
analysis?
analysis and probably additional discussion. They utilize a methodology that CARB approved years ago. Wind-free, it's referred to as the wind-free method. We have had discussions with CARB staff about it, and not necessarily that we disagree with it, but we probably need to have some additional conversations about that methodology. But as it stands now with each of the cities, they report their reductions, and we do not, district doesn't have the authority within statute to go back and really evaluate how they got to those directly, even though the audit comes in later to look at the efficacy of the reductions. But we should have some additional discussions with CARB about that
Yeah, I mean,
methodology.
for me, if it really is that incredibly cost effective to do it that way, why aren't we encouraging people to put more money into traffic control? And is it getting us the right kind of emission reductions, I guess would be the other question.
Well, I think there's a lot of CO there, but there's been, in other projects that do traffic control, the numbers don't always add up to be that extreme. So again, we need to kind of look into how that's done.
Okay, so, I mean, so for us, when you're reporting to us,
Yeah.
you know, we're looking at it and thinking,
Yeah.
well, shouldn't everything be traffic control because you're getting, you know, 13 cents a pound and 95% of your reductions from one project.
There's also leveraging that's in there too. So
Exactly.
if we contribute a small amount of a big pot, then the numbers start looking better.
So I assume that those emission reductions that they're getting are not SIP creditable?
Well, I think the program as it exists, the types of information we would need to make things like this SIP creditable probably aren't required to be reported, but that is also something we want to look into in the future and work with CARB on those requirements.
Would that go into our guidance or would it be some other separate process?
Well, guidance is where to start to make sure we're collecting the information and then a separate process with EPA.
And is there any way for us to estimate, you know, and I know that this is written in a way in law that tell us how many pounds of emission reductions you have. I don't care too much about some of these other pollutants. I care about NOx and PM. So is there a way for us to figure out, especially when we're giving out the guidance, and that's why we're encouraging alternative fuel technologies, right? Because we're getting the kind of emission reductions we want when people do that. Is there a way for us to
We have broke it out.
you have?
We have it at.
I thought I asked this a few months ago in something else.
I have a slide, a side slide with this information on it.
Okay, I didn't know that.
We talked about that.
We did talk about it probably last time you were here, and because, I mean, it certainly seems that for what our objectives are, we don't care how many just pounds of pollutant emission reductions we get. We care what kind of pollutant emission reductions we get. And obviously, if you're in the trading business, a pound of PM is worth a heck of a lot more than a pound of CO, which gets you nothing, right? I mean, but a pound of PM will get you, what, $150,000? So, yeah, okay,
In these
so,
calculations, when they do put them all together, it's VOC plus NOx plus PM plus 1/7 of the CO. But I always I ask the same question as well. What
no,
are the-
see, CO divided by 7, it's like a new chemical.
Yeah. So CO does.
Well, we're getting a lot of NOx emission reductions, which is good to see,
Again, that's
and
dominated by that one project.
dominated by that one project. And of course, PM, you're only getting 37 pounds, which again,
Tons per year.
pounds per year.
For the year.
Tons per year, that's tons.
That's tons.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. But if we're getting them around Mira Loma, it'd be even better, right? So anyway, this, I look at it and I think it's only of limited usefulness for our decision-making, and especially if that number is we don't have a lot of confidence in the number that we're getting from those emission reductions from that one project that skews all the rest of our cost effectiveness data. But to the extent that we can and will get a lot of NOx emission reductions through traffic management, then we should really be supporting that. I guess I would leave it up to staff to help figure that out for us. I noticed that there was at least one, and Mark pointed this out to me, that one city was purchasing credits with the money. I think you said, right? Yeah. Is that okay?
No.
No?
If the credits are from mobile sources, if they're related to mobile
Uh-huh.
sources, that is perfectly acceptable.
Really?
We do have a ruling from legal that came out over a decade ago that they cannot be used for stationary source, so. But
Yeah.
if they are mobile source related, then
Credits.
that is acceptable.
Yeah, the only requirement in the statute is that the reductions come from mobile sources. That's it.
Okay. And another one seemed to be using the funding for their general plan. And that's okay if it's associated with mobile
Right.
transportation.
That's
element.
acceptable for planning purposes, but if you recall, you brought something to our attention years ago about
An EIR.
EIR, so there is now a 10% cap in that area, but also the funds cannot be used unless it's going to result in additional reductions.
Right, yeah. If you're just doing an EIR for the sake of doing an EIR, it doesn't actually get your emission reductions. Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And there's no way we're going to take up another hour.
Well, I want to make an additional point about the signal sync projects. Also for the MSRC funds, they are setting aside additional monies, as I understand it, for the smaller cities for signal synchronization projects. So this is a very timely
Well,
to have
traffic,
this
traffic
discussion.
management is one of the easiest places for the city to spend those funds, because you can do traffic, signal synchronization, et cetera.
Mhm.
So a lot of cities primarily use it for that, and unfortunately don't use it for other kinds of projects, and then they try to get creative, such as general plan and all that, where it's sort of, in my mind, questionable to be using those funds for that kind of thing, but apparently they're allowed to do it, so, because they don't have other projects where they can
Where they can
spend
use
the
it.
funds, so part of what we're doing with the MSRC program is trying to encourage them, hey, we'll give you more money, tell us, give us a project that supports
AQMP. It's great. Helpful.
You know, one of the things that I would like to ask staff to look into is to see if we can have a consortium kind of program that everybody can get into.
Yeah.
If we look at the $33 million that we have average each year, remaining funds are pre-designated, and I recognize many of those pre-designated projects may not ever really come to fruition. That if we then have a consortium type of program that we can think of, and I could think of 4 or 5 right off my head, but I won't take everybody's time to go over them here, and ask everyone to buy into them, at a certain amount of dollars. I don't think that, I would love to see something that we send, that we're spending 95% of every dollar that we get in on projects that is going to help us. The reason why these dollars were created in the first place, and that is to reduce some of the environmental pollutions that vague this particular district. And so since we're the leaders and the ones who's dispersing the dollars, why don't we think of some kind of consortium programs that you bring back to the board and say, hey, look, everybody could take, whatever dollars that they would have in order to do this, that would help their cities, their region, in a very environmental, and help us. That's something that we can get some AQMP credits for without our having to basically just look at that we've got this money out there and we know that we're saying that we need it in order to help us to fund certain projects. Why don't we think of something in order to do that and get the money out of the doors instead of having it sitting in the bank accounts enjoying interest? I mean, I don't, when I look at the amount of interest that we got almost $500,000, 15, 16, of just interest on money. That's great, but it also doesn't help us to basically meet our objectives and goals. Anyway, that's a suggestion that I would like to make, and yes, Ms. Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think sometimes it's a fantasy to imagine that we simply will put money into a bank account, let's say of a city or even a county, and think, well, that's what it takes. It actually takes a lot more. Let me say, for example, in my county, we have 88 cities. And simply for, let's just take the Santa Monica Boulevard, which used to be State Route 2, and now the cities have taken over each incremental piece of that street. It starts at the beach in Santa Monica, it goes into the city of LA for, 10 blocks, then it's in Beverly Hills, then it's in West Hollywood, then it's back in LA again. And so the notion of expenditure, let's say for traffic management, unless there's a regional approach, unless there's a COG approach, it's ridiculous. Because Santa Monica has all this money for traffic calming, and they spend it. And it is one of the strangest cities, and I live there. It's like, oh, let's have some more, bumps. So everybody slows down. It's like, oh, no, they're idling then at bumps. So now we'll take the bumps out. It's just like, we've got the money, we have to think of something. I think that the notion of what can be done somewhat regionally. I mean, the county, unincorporated areas, it's a dot here and a dot there and a dot here, just in between cities that incorporated. And so we could say, we'd like to do it on this 6-block stretch, and maybe we get something out of it. Yeah. But unless the city it comes out of and the city it goes into, it's almost like our stormwater planning. If a city wants to use their stormwater for spreading grounds in the city, great, but most of them can't. So they think up what to do with their plumbing, and then it stops at the city line. So I think that there has to be much more of a COG or regional approach on this, even though the allocation of money is by the, each municipal government.
I being my supervisor for my area and being in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica now has been so disruptive. I can't even leave home and get across Santa Monica Boulevard. It's because they've been
I'm
tearing
sorry,
it up.
but you're gonna like the purple line, I can tell you that. We were thinking of tunneling under Beverly Hills because they gave us so much grief.
I don't think grief was the word you were gonna say.
I was searching.
I want to say that I do agree with you, that I think that that's the reason why I was suggesting, which we have people sitting here that have more knowledge as to how we might be able to relate to that or bring it together to assist, because it is such that you begin to wonder, why do you go 8 or 9, 10 blocks and the streets are great, and then you go another 8 or 9 or 10 blocks and they are really all, crumbled up, etc. And it's constant construction in some of these areas over and over and over again. I think that we, being the leader of air pollution and environmental things, that people look to us for that leadership. And I think we should really begin to step out, because we are the ones now who's handing out how much money that we gave out this last time? The grand totals here was revenues itself that we had?
21 million.
What, 68?
21
million
This program, yes.
for this one.
Yes.
And Mr.
So
Chairman,
that gives us,
if I may, I bet staff is dying to tell us, it's, at least some of the COGs have been doing this, right? I mean, it was Gateway Cities that had.
Gateway cities, WR COG consistently.
Take the money and pool it and put it into a more regional type project.
Yes, we do have some work to do with the cities and COGs to make sure that there's a good communication with them about how they use the funds and sort of the requirements that go along, with using the funds, but there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, the other thing is there are often conflicting goals, and it's difficult for a city council, even a full-time city council like the city of Los Angeles. They adopt a Vision Zero plan to try to lessen traffic fatalities. And part of their Vision Zero plan was to narrow 2-lane streets to 1 lane. Well, everybody is waiting to get in line to get in, And there's so much pushback about it, but also it didn't help air quality, that's for sure. And they've done it in a lot of cities where they want you to be frustrated with driving so that you'll use your bicycle and use the train. And instead, everybody's frustrated with driving and replaces the city council. You know, and then they start all over. So, you know, I honestly, in many ways, we really need more of it's not like we can tell our municipalities what to do, but I think they're kind of sometimes feeling on their own in many places. And, you know, the COG is hard enough to get agreement about anything, but at least a lot of them are contiguous in terms of not just traffic management techniques, but the other things that can help with air quality. Because without a regional approach, it's just very hit and miss.
One of the
Well,
things that,
you know, I was going to say, then I think you have a very good point in being not an elected official, but there was a reason why the legislature gave us this responsibility of administering this dollars, is that so that we could have input as it relates to what air quality itself would be. It wasn't just so that we would be administering it, but so that we would begin to talk about those kind of things that are going to be beneficial to this region. And I think that we need to, you know, that's a leadership role that we need to really embrace and recognize. Not a leadership that we become a dictator, but certainly an implementer of fresh ideas and approaches as to what can help us, since we're the ones who know what they are and how the technology is evolving in this area, so that we can spread that information and then spread some ideas or projects that may be cumulative and coordinated. Supervisor Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're really getting onto something here. Dr. Parker, you're spot on that, and Supervisor Kill, you're right. The regional COG approach is the way to go, and we should come up and be in the reserves. Maybe I said they're prudent, and they're maybe overly prudent. They probably only need to be about a third as much as they are. So we've got money they're not being used, and then it's not being used effectively. So we need to pursue this and try to come up with a system that gets more regional use out of those funds, and also uses more of that money that's been sitting in the bank, drawing at virtually no interest.
Absolutely. Well, I think that every year when we have, go ahead, Mayor.
Well, that's one of the reasons we just started at MSRC this new program to do this matching and encourage the cities and COGs to come forward with projects that support the AQMP. We weren't doing that in the past. We had a matching program that where we matched dollars for projects they wanted to do, whether it supported the AQMP or not. And that's why we've just changed the program, and maybe as part of that program, we ought to consider an extra incentive, if you will, for COGs or coming forward with regional approaches that we could increase the incentive somehow. I would encourage staff to take a look at that and see what we could do.
Go ahead, Supervisor.
The other thing is, many of my cities and cities in the county are having this kind of debate about electric vehicle recharging stations. Where would they best be placed? One camp thinks, you know, they're best placed, and this is all we're doing now, where people go. We'll put a couple at the library and a couple at the courts, etc. The other camp is thinking that maybe we need refilling stations like we have for gasoline, so that everybody knows where you can go and, you know, plug in even if you pay, because many of the places now are requiring payment even if you go into a parking lot. And some places you have to pay to park and then you pay for the electricity. So there's a lot of casting about and people sort of making up solutions as they go along. And I don't know if we ever had a discussion about a recommendation as to what might be the better way to go. Because I think everybody's going at the moment for, let's put a couple more where people park, and I don't know whether that is much of an effective plan. This is one of the aspects of expenditure that we support, but again, it might be helter-skelter, and not really effective.
Well, I would like to suggest to staff, in keeping with your comments there, that we talk to, as everyone knows that I'm the chairman of the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership for the entire state. And we have developed a software that you can go onto your iPhone, or your cell phone, not iPhone, but cell phone, and basically plug in and see where every station is located that would dispense hydrogen. And as we're adding more, we have that. We could have these same kind of considerations, give you a current location and get the nearest place where you can get a electrical charge.
Well, we have
If it's
it.
free, if it's costly.
We have it. I mean, my friends with electric cars use it. They have also an app that tells them whether that particular station is being used at any particular time, which doesn't help you when it is and it's far away. I mean, people stay up nights
Yes.
trying to figure out how they're gonna go on a short drive for a vacation, trying to plan, it shouldn't be that way. If we're gonna put money into these things, we ought to, try to do, again, some kind of approach that helps people know where to go. It's very random.
Well, until you come up with fast chargers where you can
Yeah.
charge within 10 minutes a car, it really doesn't make sense to have them at stations, because you need a place where you can stay for 4 hours to charge up. But when the technology catches up and we can charge the whole battery within, say, 10 minutes or less, then it makes sense for the station approach.
But we
That's
may
what
be
Tesla
investing
does.
in something that's gonna be obsolete, hopefully soon. I mean, in a way, building a lot of charging stations for slow charging. I don't know, I just think that I haven't seen a
Well,
lot of help from my cities.
I don't think the infrastructure is going to be obsolete as much as it may be the actual, physical device, because as an example, I'm quite sure all of you have seen it too, that certain countries are saying in another 20 or 25 years, they intend to only have electric cars being made and sold in their countries. Whether or not we will ever get there in America within my lifetime, I doubt it, but it's certainly something that everybody's looking toward. And I think that someone has to take the leadership. And I think we're being given that kind of mandate or request by the legislature to step up. And these ideas can certainly benefit all of us, as we've discussed here this morning. And I think everybody's had an opportunity to give their input into it. So I think I would like to see staff, I think that rather than just annually, I think we should, unless the members of the committee disagree, I'd like to see us have another kind of a presentation within X number of months. I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but I know you guys have enough to do as it is. But of some kind of fresh ideas that we might be able to present. We've got a representative here on this committee of all of our various different counties, and that we can really certainly serve as a bully on the pulpit a little bit of asking people to join in with us to see if we could start some of these ideas and approaches. But do you think that's, I'd like to hear the other members, do you think that you would like to have a presentation come back from staff of some ideas that we could basically join together?
I think staff has something to add right now, and maybe that would help us figure out what to ask back.
So I would, Dr. Parker, Matt here, I would only comment on the EV infrastructure that Supervisor Kuehl mentioned. So the MSRC did a pretty interesting thing. They partnered with the Energy Commission, MSRC, AQMD to put in funding for infrastructure for all fuels, so electric,
I'll
hybrid.
go with the restroom so I can go right into this one.
And natural gas. So that's, I think, they're trying to coordinate amongst the funding agencies on where and how they would expend those funds. For EV infrastructure in particular, Mayor McCallum is exactly right. You would want to put the DC fast chargers in gas station-like areas so people know and they can fill up very quickly. Long dwell time is where you would have the level 2 EVSE like we have here at the district. We're always concerned about the funding that Edison is asking for the PUC to recoup for doing the stub outs. The VW settlement is going to put a lot of infrastructure out there. So I would caution cities and regions to approach those entities first rather than using their own money to put in EVSE. And if they don't meet those requirements, then they should self-fund. But I would go after those other funding opportunities first because there seems like there's a lot of funding that's being applied toward EVSE through Edison's Charge Ready program and then also the VW settlement.
So, Dr. Parker, this is Phil. I would suggest that maybe in 6 months we come back. There's a few things going on now. We are working with CARB to update our guidelines and potentially the state level guidelines, and that's where a lot of these concepts and ideas, again, under this program, we can't require anything beyond what the statute allows us to require, but we can encourage and facilitate some of the ideas here. So I think we need to work a little bit with CARB, but also internally to see how we can put together maybe some model projects or model programs that are more regionally based, and also see how we can leverage not just MSRC funds, but other funding sources that we have. So in 6 months, I think we could come back and report back on that, if that's okay.
I think also with vehicle replacement, there are also kind of contravening ideas, because in my county, for instance, we're not allowed to stop using a vehicle unless it's really in bad shape. And this was a way to, stop any kind of graft like, oh, quick, let's buy a bunch of new cars, even though these are perfectly serviceable. So even to replace them for a good reason, like, we have replaced everything in the old days with hybrids, and now we're replacing them with electrics. But to do it really quickly when things are still serviceable is against, actually, the regulations of the county. So in a way, it's another reason why we haven't spent all that money, because we're planning on replacing our heavy-duty equipment with, with electric where we can, but it's not dead yet.
If you had outside supplemental funding to do it, would it be okay? If there were, say for instance, that the legislature today was to pass a bill that had hundreds of millions and $1.5 billion, a lot of it going to mobile source emission reductions, and some of it got to LA County, would you be able to then?
Well, we'd have to change, I mean,
You have to
as I
actually change
said, these things run against each other.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're doing it for air quality purposes.
As an LA County taxpayer, I can understand the need not to spend the money haphazardly on things that don't need to be replaced. But if there was outside money coming in to help get us.
Well, I think it makes sense, but it requires a change, which is another reason why there's money there. Because we want our sustainability officer to say, you need the following changes in your, your ordinances in order to do these things.
So it's a lot more complicated.
Well, it's always more complicated, but complicated is, unlike some politicians think, complicated is a good thing and we're supposed to deal with it. But it is another reason why it takes some time, because you have to go through, sort of have a plan. What do? We have a massive fleet. And, we're trying to get Gary to give us a whole plan so we can say, change this ordinance, go to this, go to that. So I think we will accomplish it, but the previous board wasn't terribly environmentally minded. And so we just sort of started with the board that came in a couple of years ago. Not as an excuse, because I agree with you, money should go out the door. But I think we have to figure out sort of how to do it and what needs to be changed in a massive set of regulations.
Well, one of the things that we need to also take in consideration, that the bill that was just passed this other day, we're going to be getting $30 to $50 million additional dollars and to couple those dollars with other dollars, that helps us to get closer to the goal that we set forth in our, in our air management quality plan. It's up to basically help us to achieve the reductions that we're looking for. So it may be a win-win for everyone, for us as well as for the cities and the counties, in order to kind of partnership together and think about how can we accelerate that with these additional dollars that are designated to go directly for the same basic reasons. I think the language is almost identical to what we should be doing with those dollars when we get them. So anyway, I think that this has been a very good discussion among everyone, and staff, Dr. Fine said he will be back to us within 6 months.
Well, this is an
with some
action
ideas.
item, Mr. Chairman, so I'd be happy to move it, but we haven't asked for public comment yet, so we should see if there's any members of the public, any of our locations who want to
Okay.
comment first. Doesn't
Any
look like
comments there at CC8?
Not here at CC.
None here. Supervisor Ashley, any comments? Anyone public wants to comment there?
No, no one wishes to comment here, and I'm good with the direction we're going.
Okay, then I will
Okay,
move the item with the added provision that staff return in 6 months to talk about the bigger picture items of regionalization, and perhaps even come back and talk about how we calculate that traffic easement or calming benefits. So
Second,
that's.
all of that,
Been moved in second.
the whole dang thing.
Who's going to, roll call, please?
Supervisor Ashley,
Yes?
Supervisor Kuehl,
Aye.
Dr. Liu,
Aye.
Mayor McCallum,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. And as we have stated before, we're going to continue item 2 to our next October meeting. And written reports, any comments about the written reports? Should we accept them as written reports, and they will be filed as such? No comments by anyone, so that the chair moves that those items be accepted and filed.
Second?
Okay. Any other matters that need to be discussed? Hearing none, any other public comments from anyone there at CC8?
None here, Dr. Parker.
None? Okay.
None here.
None here. Then I move that this Mobile Source Committee meeting be adjourned until our next meeting in October. I'll see you on October 20th at 9 a.m. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Say then, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Should have started.